Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us for our session 2 for the 2025 Reimagining Rural Virtual Community Gathering Series. We're excited to be back again this evening and have you all with us. We have a great lineup. So tonight we are kind of foregoing a presentation or a speaker, and we're going to be hearing from 3 fantastic communities that have done some great work building some community vibrancy in their towns. So just before we get started, if you're just joining us, and you can, please sign in. So if you did not register last week, please sign in with the QR code. If you're not tech savvy enough to utilize the QR code, that's okay. Please have a paper sign in at your location for contact information. We need this contact information to do a follow-up survey evaluation with folks once the program is over. And it's a great way for us to communicate directly with community members who are very interested in rural community topics. We do not share contact information with anybody, so you don't need to be worried about spam or us sending it off to lots of other folks. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in. So if you're new tonight, this is information about Reimagining Rural. If you've been here with us before, this is a little bit of a repeat. So Reimagining Rural is a place for Montana's small towns to gather, connect, share, and learn to build vibrant, sustainable futures for our communities. Through this program, we aim to inspire our rural people to reimagine their community. We embrace different perspectives, individuals, and ideas. We connect through shared hopes, dreams, and experiences. And we want to create positive change because, after all, at the end of the day, your community is worth it. Reimagining Rural is not a comprehensive community development program. It's basically, we like to look at it as it's the beginning of a long journey to doing great community work. So program logistics. Again, tonight we have our wonderful Skylar Gurman on here. She is our tech guru. If by chance y'all have some technical issues, you can email Skylar at her email here, her email address, or you can call her on her cell phone. She is okay. She's joining us, and she's keeping us on track with our tech. So again, the agenda, little bit, this is a repeat from last week, but we will not have this featured speaker. We're just going to do community success stories because, after all, that's what our communities really like to hear is what is everybody doing and how do they get it done? Because the best way we learn is from each other because we're all in this together. And then again, we have about 40 minutes designated for your community conversations. And I'm super excited to see how the self-assessment worked. If any of you found it useful to your town. So that's going to be interesting because that's the first time we've ever tried that. And then we will come back all together again, and we'll just kind of do a really quick wrap up and a preview of our 3rd session. We do love questions, and we love to get input because this is a very fluid program. So please use the chat box to share during the featured speakers. We will work to respond and answer as best as we can throughout the evening. And please remember to mute yourself. All right. Okay, so with that, we had a little bit of already our agenda is changed. So what we're going to do, we're all over the place. We're completely backwards. We're doing Winnett. Okay. So on your all agenda, it's right. So our first community up is Winnett, and then we're going to move into Baker, and last is Choteau. Early on today, we moved to plan B, and we were going to do Choteau first because the gals from Choteau have another meeting tonight. Anyway, last minute change. So we're back to plan A, which is Winnett. So I am going to turn the microphone piece over to my colleague, Tara Mastel, who is actually joining us live from Winnett tonight. And she has a community member she's going to introduce, and they are going to talk about all the wonderful things that have been happening in Winnett. And while they're speaking, we pulled up some pictures so you can kind of visually see some of the projects and kind of some of the stuff that's been happening in Winnett. It might not coincide directly with the conversation that's happening, but you'll at least get to visually see where is Winnett and what are some of the things that they're doing. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Tara.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up? Yep. Okay, good deal. So I'm glad to join you, everybody. I am here in Winnett, and I am joined by my friend and fellow community spark plug, Diane Algren. And Diane has been working with Winnett with the Winnett Aces for quite a long time. I'm going to just give Winnett has done so many things. I'm going to give just like a rundown and then turn it over to Diane, ask her some of the key questions. So first of all, the folks in Winnett that ended up being the Winnett Aces, they started meeting towards the end of 2016. And one of the first meetings was kind of focused on, there was some special birds that were kind of found in the area, or maybe that was farther back. But the community started gathering to talk about that. And then, as I understand it, the conversation really was dominated by what's going on in the community and things happening around the Winnett community. Remember, we talked about small wins last week. One of the small wins that they chalk up as one of the first things that they did was they got beef in their schools. This is cattle country here, and on their website, they have a really awesome kind of rundown. It was their first project and their fastest, a small win. Gave them some confidence to keep going. They have established the Winnett Times newsletter. They have jam sessions. Winnett Aces became the fiscal sponsor for the Sweet Pea Daycare. How many of our small towns wouldn't we love to have a daycare in our small towns? The daycare opened just in 2023 in the spring. Winnett Aces also started a renovation project on the top floor of their courthouse. They're in the process, as I understand right now, remodeling the courthouse for office spaces and apartments. Winnett is one of the towns where there was no place for a teacher to live. We've heard that a few places where it doesn't matter what jobs you have, there's no place for anybody to move into. So housing is very much a priority. One of the most impressive projects is 55 Main. They had a building called the Odd Fellows that they needed to move somewhere else, or it was going to have to come down. Instead of taking that historic building down, one of the oldest buildings in town, they actually moved the building down the street to a new location. And now that building is being remodeled, and they hope to have a local business there, a visitor center, and housing in the top floor. In the process of having that renovated, they have had many celebrations and dinners in that building, even in its process of being remodeled. So that's some of the community stuff. They also have a very active conservation committee working on range improvement, cost share projects. They have 2 staff and plus a soil health staff. Well, you have 7 staff altogether. Yes, at ACES. So this started just as a community meeting, and now they have 7 staff members. They have a land committee working with RSA out of Malta on a business incubator and grass bank for supplemental grazing for ranchers, and also giving priority to young producers, trying to get folks into the business. And then they have an education committee with a staff person that does really impressive educational programs. They are really great. If you're a social media, follow them on Facebook or Instagram. Okay, Diane, what did I miss?
Well, I think that's enough.
Yeah.
If we get into it too far, it gets a little overwhelming. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. And first, I would like to say thank you, Tara, for coming to Winnett, Montana, and all your staff and all you guys do. I think it's really beneficial to rural communities to have that mentorship and be able to have those communications. So thank you. And we've been involved with you guys in
Yes.
several spots.
Yes, for a long time.
So thank you for doing that, I guess, first. And welcome everybody to our community center. We lay claim to a little bit of the community center. It was brought up in some of our first meetings, and then a really fantastic group of mostly ladies, got going on it and became their own organization. And it's amazing. If you haven't seen it and you're going by Winnett, I would advise to stop and see, because it's very cool. A lot of history. You can see a little bit of it behind us as far as the historical part of Petroleum County. So we're really proud of that.
Yeah, I have done that. I have literally been driving by, and just when it very first opened, I just stopped by. That's a picture right there of the community center going up, and it is quite a modern building, but it does have it fits in well on the main street, and we are in the kind of the lunchroom area, but so it's fairly, it's a new modern building, but I put us as in, this is our backdrop here, because they have this whole corner and there's cozy chairs. It's something to see. Yes. Well, let's get into the first question here. Diane, as you have been working with your community members, how has the culture or the vibe, as my college age students say, or the community pride, how has that evolved as you've made progress on community projects in Winnett?
Sure. So I will say I'm performing as usual here. I forgot my notes at home. I made notes to remind myself, so I apologize if I get off track. Tara will keep me on. So yeah, I would say our culture has been enhanced. Because we're doing what we used to do and getting together again. Be it sometimes it's just meetings, but we have the jam sessions going on at the 55 Main, and they've brought some different cultural, like artists came in, and so they're doing more with that and just getting us together more, and then working on the projects brings us together too, because there's huge amount of volunteer labor and machinery and everything for a lot of these projects. So the vibe, I think it just continues to vibe. It's just been, I don't know how to explain it, so much fun, and it has continued to grow. As we do more projects, it draws someone else in that has that interest, or someone brings a project to us that we hadn't thought about, whatever. So I think that is continuing on. Pride is huge.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, I think it just continues to grow also. And we're proud but humbled.
Yeah.
Because when we start these things, and the way it has drawn people in and drawing funds, I mean, like this community center was just basically a dream. The gals had a plan, and a graduate from Winnett, a 1958 graduate, came and to the all-school reunion, liked their plan, and called them a couple months later and offered $5 million to help build a community center. So it's just been really interesting to me how the positive and draws folks in.
Yeah.
So that's been fun.
Well, that we have a saying in our community vitality program with an extension that investment follows vision, and so the group that had the vision for a place to meet, because it was hard to get together.
Right.
So you had the vision, or these ladies had the vision, and then somebody invested in that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
pretty great. Let's see. Move on to the next question. What have been some of the biggest challenges your community has faced during this time, and what are some of the solutions that you implemented to get past?
So some of the challenges, I would say, well, funding
Yeah.
is always a challenge, as we all know. But once again, we have been blessed with us young folks and some of us mature folks too, not myself included, but have the vision and the ability, the grant writing ability has just been phenomenal here. And so that has not been as big an issue as you would think.
Yeah.
And once again, the funding draws more funding.
Yeah.
Mr. Carroll, who gave the original $5 million here, has set up a donor advised fund
Oh, yeah.
and is granting about $80,000 a year for
Wow.
projects in the area. And so all of that stuff, we have a Petroleum County Endowment Fund that's slowly growing, and they give out scholarships, and so all of that has kind of, I guess that's the challenges and some of our solutions that we've had. Yeah, maybe some of the other challenge has been some of the naysayers, I guess I would say.
Yeah, talk about that.
So yes, when we first started out, I sent out an email to some of my neighbor ranchers and asked if we wanted to get together, and we did. And it just continued to be so much fun. And I think I was telling Tara before, we maybe became known as being a little bit cliquish, and we didn't intend that. But things were just going so well and flowing so well that I guess we didn't want to mess with the mojo or whatever. So maybe looking back would have done a little better job of, I mean, we always advertised our meetings and everything, but would maybe have done a better job of like calling folks one-on-one, inviting them. But as we've gone along, it's, folks, like I say, are being drawn in by different projects. They see success. Tara mentioned the beef in the school. That was huge for a quick success. And it was something that, I mean, that's our major production is beef. And so how could anyone argue with that?
Yeah.
And it was all donated. It wasn't costing the school anything. The ranchers donated that beef. And who doesn't want local beef and feeding your kids? I mean, how could you? So, so that was one of the great things that just kind of has kept us going. I guess, I'm sure there's more. I had more in my notes.
Yeah.
But they're somewhere else, so.
No worries, no
Moving on.
worries, no worries. So I wanted to ask you a question. One thing that I found so just fascinating was we were at the Small Town Summit in Lewistown, and we were visiting, and you said you felt like part of the success was that you kept things really positive and you celebrated. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think everybody's struggling to get volunteers and get people involved. Can you talk about how that helped, how you think that helped?
Sure. Yeah, I think it has been really helpful. To start with, we decided not to be political. And we decided that we didn't want to, we've all gone to so many meetings and come out of them with the fight and defend attitude and went home mad. And we just decided that we weren't going to do that. So it's been fun. We've kept it fun. Humor is part of our whole process, and that's huge. And just have tried to promote what we think we're doing well as a community and as ranchers and as neighbors, rather than defend and get into an argument or whatever. And I think that's been a big part of our success.
Yeah, And you celebrate too, right? I
Oh,
saw-
yeah,
You have
yeah.
your annual meeting coming up, and it's a typical, I saw some, or
Had a
maybe
dance.
you already had
We
it.
already had it.
You had it, okay.
Yes, had a dance and yeah, just once again, getting people together.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's been a big part of it.
awesome. Let's see, Jennifer, we'll ask the last question, and then maybe there's people that have questions. So the last question that we have here for our listeners who may be just starting on community projects, because we know that happens a lot with Reimagining Rural. And some people find working on their community daunting. Do you have a piece of advice that you could offer to communities or people that are just getting started or
Sure.
just trying to figure out what can we do here?
So I'd like to have a dollar for every time we've been asked, how did you get started?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if the stars were aligned right. I have no idea. As we kept meeting, we were meeting monthly, and these projects kept coming forward, and it's like, okay, when are we going to hit the wall? We're going to get to a meeting where no one's going to show up
Yeah.
or something, and it just never happened. And so that's not it. I don't know. You just got to try it and see. And if the right people are lined up and behind it, and your community, I think it'll go. We have been, once again, so fortunate with our people. We have quite a few young people that
Yeah.
have moved back, and it just makes me so excited. I'm passionate about, my husband and I were given an opportunity to start a ranch, and so I'm passionate about transitioning. And that's not only ranching, all business
Yeah,
needs
absolutely.
to be ready to transfer.
Yeah.
So we just, use your people, recognize, everybody has strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And you recognize that, you respect both.
Yeah.
Respect is a huge part of it. Respect your fellow neighbors and your community members. I think a facilitator, to begin with, we had Bill Melton, and I have a lot of folks know Bill Melton, but I love Bill. He was very helpful, and he's a member also and he's very involved still, but he was very helpful in making sure everyone was heard. So, and people feel safe in bringing up an idea. And we might rib them a little, or, roll our eyes. Oh, come on, Laura, what are you, what are you talking about? But then if there's enough oomph behind it and people are interested, and it just starts rolling, and yeah.
That facilitator idea is really interesting. I know you have a meeting on Thursday, and our colleague within Extension is coming to facilitate on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Katie Weaver,
Oh,
what I
sure.
heard. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes,
I mean, that
yep.
is actually really,
Yes.
it does make it safe and everybody feels comfortable sharing or has the ability. Yeah, that's very
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah, I think that was important. I've brought that up, and I was not necessarily a fan to begin with, but I think it can be important. And somebody that's maybe not even in your community might be a little easier for everyone involved and for the facilitator, so.
Well, and that costs money sometimes, so
Yes, it
investing in
does.
yourself.
Yes.
Spending money
Yes.
on your
Yep.
own self, yeah.
Yeah, and deciding where that investment goes. I mean, we've had the number of hours that's been volunteered and in-kind work, and it's just been phenomenal. And it's that way in every community. There's always a few that do it, but I think ACES has brought that out even more.
Yep.
And it's just, once again, so humbling to be a part of it. It's exciting and humbling both.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. It's been great. I would highly encourage it.
Excellent. Okay, Jennifer, I feel like does anybody, we have 5 minutes left?
You have 5 minutes left. So if anybody has questions, they can unmute or they can put them in the chat box.
Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left for to hear about Winnett, or if you have specific questions for Diane, you can put them in the chat box or unmute.
Yeah. As you're getting to your keyboard and typing in your questions, I did a terrible job of introducing Diane. She is her and her husband are ranchers in the area, and they have been, sounds like founding members of the ACES organization. So you kind of got the gist of it, that ACES is an organization, and they also have this Petroleum County Community Center is now its own organization. So they have multiple things that maybe started around the same time.
I guess I would say really quick too, my baby right now is an investment co-op.
Oh, okay.
And to put it back, it's not part of ACES, but I don't think I ever would have had the
Yeah.
fortitude to start it or promote it. But we are getting, we have 70 members. We have $70,000 in the bank. It will be set up as a revolving loan fund.
Wow.
And it's one of the first in the state, and I'm just excited about it, and I hope it works. We
Okay.
haven't made a loan yet.
So investment co-op for lending for,
Project, business, new business, existing business. Yeah, we're trying to leave it as open as possible,
Cool.
and it's a local board, and we have an advisory board of local bankers around us to
Yeah.
help us get through it. It's one of those deals where it sounded really cool to begin with. Well, it is really cool, but holy cats, the details
Yeah.
is crazy when
Yeah.
you get into it, but I'm really excited about it, so.
yes.
Sarah, somebody from Dillon has a question. So, Christina, do you guys just want to unmute, or do you want to chat?
We should be unmuted.
Okay, we
Go
can
for
hear
it.
you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Kind of good. Pretty good.
Microphone is up again. I'm Rebecca with the Beaver Chamber of Commerce in Dillon, Montana. And this is a great story, Tara. Thanks so much for the interview, and congratulations, Winnett, on what a big win for you. My question is, which came first? Did the $5 million come first, or did you already have a plan? Like, had you been meeting for 5 years and struggling with funding, and then the $5 million came? How did that work?
Thank you so much for that question. Did you say Rebecca from the chamber in Dillon? Think so? Yeah, that's a great question.
Sure, thanks. So we started in the fall of 2016. ACES started talking about community center. And then this group of gals got started. They got a plan. One of their board members was an architect, which is
Handy.
very handy. So they got going, and then the school reunion was about 2018 or 19. Anyway, and so they had bought these lots where we're sitting now. They had those bought or were donated, and had a plan. It wasn't nearly like this, of
Yeah.
course. They didn't plan on $5 million coming, so
Yeah.
it was scaled down considerably. But they had a plan, and they set up a tent in the lots and pictures, and we're gonna do this, and really promoted it. And then it was about 2 months later that Mr. Carroll called them, and there were a lot of tears in the community.
Okay, so they set up the tent. This is during the all-school reunion. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
July. yes.
mid-July. Yeah. So so you have a vision. Investment follows vision. I just love this because I have heard, in our line of work, community vitality, people talk about Winnett a lot, and I heard somebody say, "Oh, well, they got the money and then they were able to do all this stuff." And Diane is shaking her head. No,
No,
no.
no, they had a plan, and like I say, it expanded, of course, when he gave that money. I want to emphasize, he gave half of that money towards building and put half in an endowment for maintenance, and that
so
is
smart.
huge.
That's smart.
Because we all like to build something. I think we would have gotten something built even without that. But then when it comes time to pay the taxes and pay the janitor and all of that, that's when it gets tough. And with that endowment, they're able to keep the fees very, very usable for the building. I mean, the other end of this building has a gym size
It's beautiful.
room for, well, they play ball in it and everything, but.
Pickleball.
Yes,
Yeah.
pickleball, the whole
Yeah.
thing, but weddings and funerals and events and,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been awesome.
We paid $25 to rent it tonight, and it's got everything you could possibly need here. So yeah, the fees are very affordable. Okay, so
We have two quick questions. I'm not sure. So one is Peggy's wanting to know if you have a bank, if when it has a bank. No, if is that why why you're starting the investment co-op?
Not necessarily. We have, everybody probably banks in Lewistown, Roundup, Garfield County, 50 to 70 miles away. The investment co-op to me is a self-help thing. And in talking to a lot of investment folks, they're saying your money is going to Edward Jones. Nothing against Edward Jones, but your money is going out of the community. And I wanted to see another option besides just donating, which people are wonderful at.
Yeah.
This investment co-op is a little different structure and probably is not going, well, it won't be a huge return on your funds. But hopefully we'll get to the point where we can have a little bit of return on your funds. The big payoff is investing in your community, but mostly it was I just really liked the concept of the self-help and trying to keep some of our money at home.
you might.
Okay, next question, and then we have to transition into the next community. Again, like we could spend the whole 2 hours with each one of our
Really
communities.
could, yes.
We still could. So last question, and then we got to move on. So very quickly, can you just give us 1 or 2 sentences about what the role of the facilitator in Winnett Aces' work?
So to begin with, Bill kind of has he's a, I don't know if it's licensed facilitator, but he has been a facilitator for folks for
a long time.
Years, yes. So he doesn't make a big deal out of it. He just makes sure that, he'll go around the table and say, well, you have to say something.
Yeah.
Please, or, please say something. So he makes everybody talk. And sometimes, you'll have in a community somebody that is they're going to get things done, which is very admirable. But maybe they kind of take over the situation. And so Bill just kind of very politely and very, low key says, well, we better let somebody else weigh in on this or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And I don't think it should be a big deal. Bill if things are going right, he doesn't say a word.
So in summary, like he comes in, you have an outsider who comes in that kind of helps guide and direct your conversation and helps you guys as a group get from point A to point B. And he's done that. And like Tara said, you're using Katie Weaver is coming in to help facilitate. So you've just basically utilized the services of an outside person who has come in to help guide your local conversations, help get that conversation from point A to point B, and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard. Is what it kind of sounds like.
Yes, and that was more at the beginning. There are occasions when it's good to have somebody, but it's not a constant anymore by any means. We've learned from Bill to some extent.
I bet, yeah.
And he comes to he's still involved with a lot of the meetings. So a lot of times he's just there at the meeting and helps us out too. But to begin with, I think it was beneficial to just kind of have someone just keep on track and make sure everyone spoke or got the opportunity to speak and that no one just kind of took the ball and ran. And like I say, people need to be able to do that. And I admire folks that can do
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
but there's a happy medium,
Yeah.
as always.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, with that, it's so wonderful. And like I said, I thank you so much, Diane, for joining us tonight. We could probably sit here and talk 2 hours just about
Easily.
Winnett because of all the fantastic stuff that your small town and your folks have been able to do. We will send out more information. We did send out a video. The Winnett Aces has created a video. It's fantastic. We will send out more information. So if any of you communities out there want to know more about Winnett Aces, we'll make sure that we get that information to you. So in the meantime, we need to pivot and switch directions, and we're going to move from Winnett, which is kind of South Central Montana, small town, over to southeastern Montana, to the community of Baker, which is just literally a stone's throw away from North Dakota. So Taylor Crowell from Montana Community Foundation is here, and she is going to do the conversation with Vaughn Zenko from Baker, who is a spark plug extraordinaire. So with that, I'm just gonna, again, stop talking and turn it over to Taylor and Vaughn. And we do have some pictures, some graphics to go along with what's happening in Baker. So Taylor, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jennifer. I am not going to do too much of an introduction for Vaughn because I think some folks on the call might know him, and I also really want him to talk about the projects that he has going on in Baker. But I'm just going to preface our conversation with I'm hearing so many kind of like ties into the work that Winnett's doing, right? Like Vaughn will talk about this, but rehabbing of historic properties, developing childcare solutions, doing kind of some investment co-ops themselves, and a variety of both big and small projects in Baker. So I'm really excited for Vaughn to kind of talk about all of those. And I'll just share that Vaughn is the executive director of both SMART and AMITA. So SMART is the Southeast Montana Area Revitalization Team. And then AMITA is the Eastern Montana Economic Development Authority. And he's a former DJ. So some of you guys might recognize his voice as soon as Vaughn starts chatting. And also, notably, the 2024 Baker Citizen of the Year. So with that, Vaughn, my first question for you is kind of what have you been working on? What are maybe 3 or 4 projects? Because I know similar to Winnett, you guys are working on so many different projects in Baker. But what are some 3 or 4 different projects that you guys have kind of tackled in Baker recently?
Well, first, thank you very much for the intro, Taylor. I'm humbled by that. It's one of those things where what aren't we working on? You're a rural community where we do economic development, and there's 10,000 different things that you can kind of dig into. Some of the big ones that we've just completed. I mean, like you said, we picked up an old bank building that was built in 1910. First time I ever walked through that building, my first thought was my best investment here might be a book of matches. I could probably get a grant for that. It was in that terrible of shape. Ugly, empty lot there behind it. And we managed to turn that into a thriving business and a little pocket park next door, right in the downtown area. That's something that 3 years ago when I took over this job, I didn't think we'd ever be able to finish anything like that. I didn't think there was anything we'd be able to do with that, but it was something we just had to power through. We were able to do that. We turned the backside of that building into a brand new visitor center. Very similar. It was kind of trash, but we were able to turn that into Fallon County's first ever visitor center, which also happens to be the office that I'm sitting in here. We moved ourselves and the Chamber of Commerce as kind of one big economic development hub in downtown Baker. So we were able to do that. We didn't include any pictures, but yeah, childcare was another big one that we tackled. And when we started that project in 2019, Baker was one of 4 counties in the entire state that had 0 licensed childcare. And now we got Head Start to expand to Baker. For the first time in 30 years, they've expanded in Eastern Montana, and we started a separate facility. So we went from 0 licensed slots to 38 licensed slots, and going to continue to grow on that. So that's just, I mean, that's just some big stuff. But boy, there's so much. I mean, obviously, with every community, we're working on workforce issues with the school. We're working on housing issues. We're our big one that we're starting this year. We got a grant to try to do a movie theater project. The last movie in Baker was the Care Bears movie in 1985, and so we're trying to get that started in association with what we've begun with a community theater and an arts and culture council. There's so many different things. They all kind of coincide with quality of life, but it's fun what we do. We've got our fingers in all kinds of different pools here.
That's awesome. I have a quick follow-up question, just because I feel like we've talked a lot so far in Reimagining Rural about some like tangible projects, but I'm curious to hear more about like the Arts and Culture Council and some of the work that you guys are doing there. Because my understanding is, right, like bringing a lot more like live music to Baker and stuff like that.
There's not there really wasn't any arts and culture scene to speak of, and we got a small little grant for $500 through the We Can boot camp. You guys might be familiar with that. We got a little $500 grant, and what we decided to do was start an arts and culture council to just sort of promote. We knew there were some artists, we knew there was musicians in town, and there just wasn't really anything to promote them, not really an avenue for them to showcase what they could do. So we parlayed that $500 into creating an art walk, where we managed to find 16 local artists, and we were stunned by that. We just threw it out there on social media and asked, like, hey, are there any artists? And they're like, yeah. And we put all these pictures down in local businesses, and it was all kinds of different forms of art. Some of it was pottery, some of it was metalwork, some of it was just quilting. But we found 16 people to partake, and it was a great event for downtown because we had 180 people wandering around downtown looking at all these different projects, and then we took the $2,000 we made from that and decided we were going to start a community theater. There'd never been a community theater in Baker, and put on a big Broadway musical because I was crazy and wanted to start big, and I think that's important. Sometimes you have to make a spectacle of yourselves if you want people to take notice, and so that's what we did. And we got some sponsors for that. We wound up taking the 2,000 we had, and we made 23,000 off of that first production of the community theater. And so now our Arts and Culture Council, that started with a $500 grant, is really thriving. And we're doing the art walk. We're bringing in live music. We're bringing in community theater. We're doing all kinds of great stuff. And it started super small that way.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Yeah, I have like a similar question that Tara posed for Winnett, but I'm just curious to hear about like how the culture and the vibe and maybe community pride has changed in Baker. Like what do you notice over the past 3 years as you kind of like tackle these projects one by one?
There's more excitement here. Like this was very much a town of, I don't want to say a town of complainers, but it was a town that would sit around and really say, and Tara knows this, like, boy, they should really do something about that, and we've turned it into like, oh, you can be the they on that. And it's interesting that the graphic you have up, what does SMART actually do? That was the question that everybody asked me. And that was the question I had. SMART had been in existence since 1982, and I could not identify one thing that they'd accomplished in those years. And they'd done some stuff, but we've got an urban renewal district and something, but not those big spectacle things. And so what we really wanted to do was show people that, like, you know what, you can get things done, and we can do things that actually are impactful and noticeable with quality of life in the community. So that was, that's been a goal with SMART over the last 3.5 years or so. Is, yeah, we want to do good things for the community. We want to do things that make a real specific difference. And when you see what we've done with community theater or our visitor center, it's all stuff that people are looking at with pride, like, oh, this is cool. Like, we have this in Baker now. I never expected that. I never thought that a community like this would have that kind of stuff happening. And it really is, you're seeing that culture start growing. And now you're getting more and more people that are really stepping up, and they're walking in here and saying like, hey, I've got an idea. How can I do this? And so it's not just us anymore. In a lot of cases, it's other people that are stepping up and seeing kind of what we were doing and the different projects, now thinking like, hey, we can make this happen ourselves. So I think that's really that's the cool vibe. People are actually seeing, that yeah, we're a small rural community. We're 82 miles away from the nearest Walmart, but we can have good things. It's okay. We can have good things, and we can do neat things here, and we can actually make them happen. So it's a cool thing to watch.
That's awesome. I feel like even in that last response, like you answered this a little bit, talking about how maybe folks, we're like, we should have this, but we're not as quick to jump in. And then you guys kind of going out, doing some things, making a spectacle of yourself. I love that as kind of a motto moving forward. But you really like showed people, you walked the walk, and then folks were like, hey, I can do the same. But I'm curious, beyond like kind of that initial challenge of folks kind of sitting by, what are some other challenges that have come up, and any other kind of ways that you guys have tackled them?
I think for starters, and again, this is something that gets talked about at Reimagining Rural a lot too. We had a real leadership void in town, and there weren't those people that wanted to step up and do those things. It was a lot easier to just sit with your friends and over coffee and be like, oh, somebody should do something. So we needed to figure out a way to create those leaders, and it was great what Smart was doing, but dang it, Taylor, I can't do everything myself, and
That's
my
fair.
board members can't do everything themselves. So that became a real goal for us, was, instead of like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to force this in here and Baker's going to love it, I became a thing like, we need to do stuff that people are invested in. And so that those leaders organically develop. So yeah, I think a lot of times when you talk about economic development and projects like this, we have really fun ideas that we think to ourselves, this is going to be great for the community, but we're not really necessarily asking the individuals like, are you invested enough in this that you're going to contribute your time to that? And so we really made a concerted effort to sort of find those activities and those projects where, instead of us like forcing what we thought were cool economic development projects on people, we let them kind of tell us organically, like, this would be really cool if we had this, and I'd like to be involved. So that's how we got kind of our community theater and our arts and culture council, and then and we started the haunted house, and some of our our different other projects. The movie theater project was a huge one that, for 25 years people have been telling me, I wish we had a movie theater in Baker, and and that's one where we know we've got the community members want that, and so we're going to have those leaders step up and really try to lead that project for us. So that was a big challenge initially, though. We felt like we had to do, like, us on the board had to do everything all by ourselves. So that was a big challenge, but kind of figuring that out and getting that going, and letting those projects develop, and here's how we can assist the stuff that the community already wants. That really helped.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like that's great guidance. Um, I feel like one of the strengths of Reimagining Rural, right, is that all of a sudden we've created kind of like collectively this network of rural communities across the state that are not in it alone, right? Like all of our rural communities are unique, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you're interested in doing an investment co-op, you can go chat with Winnett. If you're interested in, a childcare project, you can come chat with Vaughn and Baker. But I'm curious, like, what are other resources across the state that you've relied on or utilized as you've kind of been, tackling all of these different projects? Are there, good resources for other communities that folks should know about?
I think, obviously Reimagining Rural is fantastic, but that was huge for me, is to make contact with literally everybody I could. And if I had a question like, how did you do this? How did you do this? How did you do this? Montana Nonprofit Association has been huge for that. a fantastic organization. They provide a ton of free resources, even if you're not an MNA member. They put on all kinds of events. They do monthly trainings and calls where you can get together with other leaders and around the state and other organizations. And it is, I mean, we do a lot of economic development, but sometimes I learn just as much from somebody working with the senior center in Beaverhead County as I do from Jim Atchison and Colstrip, as far as what they're doing and how to go about accomplishing things. So yeah, my work with Montana Nonprofit Association has been great. Obviously the Montana Community Foundation does a fantastic job as well, but really, I mean, anybody that you can contact. And there's occasions where you hear through the grapevine, hey, Winnett did this, and just pick up a phone and call them. And that's the neat thing about working in the nonprofit sector and kind of what we do, is that everybody wants to see everybody else succeed. And even with rural community, and with rural communities too. Like it's not like these are industry secrets that we're keeping to ourselves. If you see a town that's had some success, like Carter County and Ecolak are right down the road. They've had a ton of success lately. They've got a lot of things done. And that's a phone call that I make. Let's, how are you guys doing this? How are you guys getting people to move back home? What are you doing with your downtown? What are you doing to promote entrepreneurship? And that's a phone call that you need to make. You don't have to be on an island by yourself. Find those people, find those resources, and you'll find everybody is willing to help and excited to share their stories too.
Yeah, I love that. For the final question, and then we may or may not have some time for questions for folks. Okay, I got the thumbs up from Jennifer. So yeah, folks, think about if you have any questions for Vaughn or for Baker. But my final question for you, Vaughn, is do you have any like a singular piece of advice that you would offer to either communities that are getting started with kind of their journey towards tackling community projects, or maybe folks in the community that are new to this type of work? Is there like a nugget of wisdom that you have for folks?
Have the courage to be imperfect. Have the courage to screw up a few things. That's been big. When you talk about our $1.3 million Baker childcare project, if I told you that started with making graham cracker haunted houses, that's where we started. We were like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I just need to get attention for the childcare issue. And so we started by just inviting families to come make little gingerbread haunted houses at Halloween. And then that, evolved, and now we're going to paint ornaments. And we just kept getting that momentum, and people started learning the importance of childcare because they hadn't really thought about it before. And getting a chance to talk to people, getting things around, like that was huge. The first thing we did with the building I wanted to burn down was we did a haunted house, because it was in terrible shape. Like, at the very least, I could do a haunted house here. And God, we had 400 people come through that haunted house, and it gave me a chance to explain the history of the building to them and kind of show off. They all saw what bad shape it was in and why it needed work. And just doing something, a haunted house in a rotten old building, and then that kind of grew too. So everything we've done just starts off with just doing something and having that courage to be like, this isn't great. We don't have a million bucks that's going to get it done. We're going to start somewhere, and we're going to have that courage to be imperfect and know that this is going to lead somewhere. So it's perfectly okay to start small.
That's great advice. Okay, we had one question that came in from Forsyth. Forsyth asked, you mentioned working on housing issues. Can you speak more on how you've addressed that, or kind of started to address that?
What we were working, when we started on childcare, we were looking at a childcare co-op. And as I was talking to the Cooperative Development Center, Tracy and Davey and them, the more I talked to them, the more I was like, boy, I could translate this into a housing cooperative. Everybody drives around downtown and they're like, boy, there's a ratty old building. There's a ratty old building. And nobody wants to buy it because they don't want to, you don't want to put all the money into it. But we were thinking, all right, if we start a housing cooperative, like just get people to invest in the cooperative, we can buy a terrible old house. We can basically, we can flip it. The cooperative can keep it. They can do whatever they want, but it gives people a chance to reinvest in their community. And then again, you're seeing that tangible evidence where you've got this house that's been sitting there vacant for 20 years, and now suddenly, oh wow, they turned this around. So you're not getting a massive return on your investment for being a member of that cooperative, but you're seeing the results of you being a member of that cooperative. As opposed to like a revolving loan fund, what we've developed here is, or starting to develop here anyway, is that specifically it's related to housing. Specifically, this is giving people, not only current residents but past residents too, are some of the ones that are most interested. If you live in St. Augustine, Florida, and you want to do something for Baker, invest in that co-op, because that money is staying here and it's doing good things, and it's creating housing, and it's making the city look better, and it's creating that civic pride. It's accomplishing so many different things. So that's how that started. I've worked with Muscle Shell County. Actually, weirdly, I started it, but Muscle Shell County is a little bit further along on theirs than I am on mine. They've done a good job with kind of a real estate investment co-op there too.
Awesome.
So they'd be one to look in. But for Foresight, if you're interested, I'd be happy to talk to anybody about any of this stuff. It's all fun stuff.
I think so one really quick question. What is Junction 39? And then we got to pivot.
Junction 39 is the bottom floor of the historic building. And they're a kind of a retro antique store. It's 7 retired ladies that came to me one day and asked if I knew of any place they could start a business. And I was like, boy, do I have a place for you. And so we put them in the first floor of our what is the Baker State Bank building, and boy, it's at this point it's a cornerstone of Baker, and it was fantastic. They put a lot of their own sweat equity into it, and then we put some equity into it too, and it really is. It's the heart of Baker now. It's fantastic.
Okay, we have more questions coming in on the
Quick,
chat
we get
box.
funding. The funding largely comes from fundraisers, and our county commissioners are nice enough to recognize the benefit of economic development and contribute $50,000 a year to help pay our salaries. So we've got a good investment from the county themselves for what we do. But everything else, I mean, as far as everything else comes purely through fundraising and grants, obviously.
Okay, guys, I know we have another question here, but we have to pivot so that we can get to Choteau's story. So Baker's just thank you, Vaughn, thank you for joining us and talking about the great things that are happening in Baker, because it is like, it's wonderful to see what is going on in your community. We very much appreciate it.
Email if you've got questions. I'm happy to talk. Just call, email. I'll write my info in the chat.
Okay,
thank you, guys.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing your information and being willing to speak to everybody. Who knows? We might have you on again to do a whole hour, because we could do that and here. And if you ever get to tune into Baker Sports, I think, are you still the voice of the Baker Spartans? Do you still do the games?
Occasionally, yes. Not every game, but occasionally, yes.
Okay. That's how I know Vaughn. He's the voice of the Baker Spartans. All right. Thank you. All right, we got to move on. So next presentation is coming from Choteau. And I see the gals are on here. So they're extension agents. They gave me their whole PowerPoint presentation. So we are going to run through this presentation and hear from them, and then we'll ask them a few questions at the end. So we'll see how this goes. So on the call with us is Jenn Swanson and Shelby Jones-Dozier. They are the extension agents in Teton County, and they created a brand new event in the community of Choteau, and so they're going to share that with us. So with that, I am gonna let you ladies talk, and you just tell me when to, old fashioned, tell me when to move. Tell me when to click the screen.
Well, my name is Jennifer, and Shelby's sitting right next to me, and she's got her camera on too. And you notice that we're in our winter clothes. She's got her big parka on, and I've got my hat on because we're in the county courthouse. So, Vaughn, we might be calling you for a couple of reasons. One, we want information on how to renovate old buildings, and I've always been interested in a real estate investment co-op, but we also might want to know how to wring 50 grand out of county commissioners. So, thank you for your presentation. So about Get Your Kicks at 6, it was a summer concert series in the park, and it was really born out of Reimagining Rural in a sense, even though Reimagining Rural came after we had started it. But one of the things that came up in our 2024 Reimagining Rural was that there's a paucity of things to do in Choteau. And we had heard that prior to Reimagining Rural. It came up again in that context. And, you know, I had some older relatives 2 generations back that lived here in Choteau, and they talked about going to all these dances all the time up on the mountain front. And that just wasn't available anymore. We had Performing Arts League for a while, and they brought intermittent events, but nothing ever had sustainability. So we decided to try to join up with some other folks in the community to tackle that. Next slide.
So some of the folks we joined up with, the Lions Club, they were really important. And within the Lions Club, that's Rich Clough. He leads the Loose Mules and loves music and performing. And he did a lot of work with the Lions Club to create the space that we ended up holding our Get Your Kicks. The 2 folks in the middle, they were part of the Choteau Chamber of Commerce, young, energetic people that have a vision for Choteau. And then in the upper right-hand corner, that's Melody Martinson. She owns the Choteau Acantha that recently caught on fire. And they didn't miss a beat, and they had their next issue out. But she was very important in helping support us. So really, we kind of got the ball rolling, but we had a great team around us. And we just made sure to have a lot of fun every time we got together to develop this plan.
Yeah. And the Choteau Acantha is our local newspaper. And, you know, a lot of folks don't read print newspapers anymore, but in a small town like Choteau, it's still an integral part of the community. So next slide. So now we'll start with faster. So just wanted to highlight that we had a lot of community support, and this is just a list of the sponsors who were our major donors. We also had smaller pots of money coming in from individuals, but everybody on this slide donated, you know, $750 or more, and it made it possible. And we did take some risks. We had a full slate of musicians before we had money. So, but these people came through for us, and they were wonderful. Next slide.
So here's a picture of the actual band shell in the Lions Club. They've been active in Choteau for close to 100 years, just to create a lot of physical spaces for the community to gather. So it was great to have the support of these well-connected individuals to help make this happen. Next slide.
So this slide is here to just show that we really reached out. An integral part of this project was community partners. And so we had tents there from the public health department. We had MSU Extension, which is pictured on the left here, coming down to talk about mental health awareness and so forth. We had a collaboration with the Front Range Art Association, and we helped promote their event, and we used the concert as part of their event on that week. And so we thought that that was a really important part of getting community buy-in, and it got us a guaranteed audience. If we had a community partner that week, like the Choteau Schools or the Front Range Art Association, it brought us a whole different group of listeners from the community. Next slide.
So we did a lot of promotion. We wanted to try to make sure that people actually came to our event. So we used social media, we used the newspaper, and then also physical signage. We were able to receive an innovation grant through MSU that we were able to use to pay for these really great signs. And we ended up creating a brand, which you see the logo all over everything at this point.
Yeah. And I will just add to what Shelby said. We also promoted these events on our community calendar, which was our specific Reimagining Rural project. Yes. Thank you, Reimagining Rural. Next slide. So we also had, because we were so interested in reaching out to community partners, I think people felt like they were welcome to be involved. And this is a pop-up s'mores table that the folks from the local Latter-day Saints church just brought every week. They just asked if it was okay, and we said, you betcha. And the kids loved it. And it was a free will donation, roast your own s'mores at this wonderful table. And by the end of the summer, they had, you know, handed us $500. And we welcome that kind of creativity. And we think that that was also part of keeping the community involved. Next slide.
And you can't have a good gathering without food. So initially we wanted to have food trucks come in. We had a significant challenge in finding enough food trucks. So we started looking at different options. We had some caterers that came in that used a kitchen within the concert space. But at the very end, we had some great sponsors come together. Lewis and Clark Brewing Company, they came out to provide the beer. And then we had a local food truck, Spices and Spurs, out of Power, Montana, that provided a lot of local foods. So that's a picture there of a barbecue ice cream cone. So we had a lot of innovative recipes.
Next slide. And we also promoted some local businesses to the extent possible. Wherever we could, we hired local businesses, including Badger Track Customs, which is a local graphic design company, and we made T-shirts. And we also got a fellow extension agent involved. He had a dream of being a pizza maker, and he did fantastic. He sold out every week. Next slide.
And as a part of the challenge to address how to bring food in, we found that by organizing a farmer's market, that with the farmer's market, we were able to create the opportunity for people to bring in foods. But we found that in Choteau, we had a lot of crafters that were our farmer's market vendors. So this is just a picture of some of the vendors that were present there.
Next slide. We also found that we learned as we went. We didn't explicitly set up a site for people with physical challenges, but we ended up having a corner of the event venue where wheelchairs gathered, and we realized that's an important thing for next year. And in the meantime, the city has gotten on board, and they actually wrote for their own grant and built us some extra sidewalks to help make this whole thing more accessible. So a diverse crowd and an accessible space was a goal of ours, and we found that the community really helped us with that. Next slide.
So we also wanted to incorporate physical activity and dancing. Again, going back to Jenn's family that had these stories of dances on the Rocky Mountain front. So we tried as much as we could, even with the name of Get Your Kicks, to incorporate this idea of dancing. And thankfully, a lot of people, they were willing to get out there and get their kicks.
Especially the kids. Next slide. And we also thought that, socializing was an important part of it. And, we struggled so hard. There were 9 of these concerts, and we had over 2,300 visits over the course of the summer. And those were largely some loyal folks who came back week after week, because we really pumped the idea of just come out and have some dinner in the park. You don't have to cook and, socialize. And they did. And after the first concert, Shelby and I looked at each other and we kind of teared up. It was like pictures like this. It was like seeing our community members socializing. It was so rewarding. Next slide.
And we had a really broad diversity of bands that we brought in. We had 9 weeks worth of concerts to plan. So we had everything from the Great Falls Jazz Band to local artists that were well known. And through that, we were able to expose our community to a lot of different types of music and just kind of get a feel for what people liked. But we definitely tried to keep things upbeat and peppy.
Next slide. And we had some challenges, so it wasn't all like, a bed of roses, but one of those challenges was shade. And you can see here that in the bottom right picture, the cement in the bottom right corner of the picture is the dance floor. And everybody is like super far away, except for the 2 guys in the middle who wanted a tan. And it was because it was a super hot day. And just the layout of the park is such that the close-up section is very hot. So we're working on those kind of things and collaborating with the city to think about things, but that was a significant challenge. Next slide.
And those of you that are in extension, you understand the importance of surveys. It turns out they're very hard to collect. So we had a lot to learn about how to actually connect your audience to the survey.
Yeah.
Next slide.
2,300 visits, and we only had 35 survey responses. But, we learned our lesson. It works better just to go up and say hi to somebody and say, well, you fill out the survey right there in person. So all told, 2,300 visits. That was definitely not 2,300 unique individuals, but it was some loyal people. On average, 258 people in our 1,800 person town showed up every week, and people seemed to really like it. So we were thrilled. Next slide. And, next slide. And then next slide is not what I was expecting. Go for it.
All right. So this is just some feedback that we had from social media. People are very excited. I have people stop me in town even now. They're like, are we doing Get Your Kicks again? And thankfully I can tell them that we are. We ended the season with a positive bank balance, and we were able to start finding bands for this year. So thankfully this is a program that's going to be running for a while. And when Jenn and I first approached the team that we introduced in the beginning, we said we're in this for the long game. This is not a 1 season and then drop the project. That this is something we wanted to continue growing for many years. And it really seems to be something that the public wants to have also.
Next slide. So I just wanted to add that, grant support helped us a lot. We actually started planning this before Reimagining Rural, so it didn't become our explicit Reimagining Rural project, but it could have been if the timing had been different, because it really involved a lot of different community groups. But we wanted to note that grant funding, not just MSU Extension grants, we got grants from Red Ants Pants and Three Rivers Electric and Lewis and Clark Brewery, but that was an important part of the funding, but also the professional development. We actually took an online class about festival and event planning, and we both feel like we could have done it without that, but it helped to educate ourselves a little bit about the kinds of insurance you need for events and the kind of risky things that can happen. And so we feel like that seed money and that seed education was an important part of how we can grow this to make it sustainable. That's it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. That it was fast, but that's great. Lots of pictures. It's so wonderful to see, and folks get to see what your community was up to doing. A few questions, just like the other communities that we have to ask. So you shared the event itself. How has a standing question we asked the other two towns? Can you describe how the culture or the vibe or community pride changed because of the event or in result of the event?
So I think that a lot of what goes on in Choteau, like our farmers market, it's mainly tourists that visit, but this became a Choteau local event. Local residents, if they had family visiting, they would bring their family to this event. They were excited they had something to do in Choteau. And it was on a Thursday evening during the week. And it just became a routine where people wanted to keep coming back. They were excited about how many times they had attended the event and if they had made it to all of them.
And I think another indicator of cultural spirit and kind of pride evolving is that at first we had to ask people for money, and then they showed up, and as they left, they said, I'll sponsor again next year. And we had that happen 3 different times, that sponsors we got this year, as they left the event, said, sign me up for next year. And then people that hadn't been sponsors came up and said, we'll contribute. And so that to me was real evidence that they thought it had staying power and they thought it was important. And so that was really nice. And we also had people volunteer to be part of our planning committee. Like people are bringing us, what about this musician? What about this? And so that was nice.
Okay, next question. What has been, so what were some of the challenges? You talked a little bit about this, but what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as you guys were putting this event together and doing it for the first time?
Well, Shelby alluded to that, and we talked about this before tonight's event, that one of the challenges was a little flag in spirits of the committee when we started to encounter some difficulties. Like, we had spoken to some people who are experts in farmers market development, and they basically said, if you're going to bring music to this event and have that be the headline event, you better have your food lined out, because if you don't have that, you don't have the festive atmosphere you want. And when that started to be a challenge, there was a time where Shelby and I were a little bit worried, like, is our group going to defect and leave Shelby and I kind of holding the bag? And that's where we just kind of doubled down on, look, this may not be a great, huge event, everything we wanted this first year, but we're in it for the long haul. We got to do this 3 times to know if it's going to succeed. And so at that point, people kind of got re-energized, and it was a great event. It was a great success. And every one of them had this fun, lively spirit, but we did not know that. And there was a few dark hours where going into it, stuff wasn't kind of panning out. And I think at that point, the commitment and verbalizing it got us through.
And something that emerged, holding a farmer's market was not a part of our original plan. So we did a little bit of scrambling and we learned, working with our local sanitarian, kind of what the rules were to provide food to the public. And a farmer's market seemed like a great option. But we also learned that when you run a farmer's market as MSU Extension, you're not able to exclude people that want to come that may not be selling something that, or sharing something that you necessarily want at your public family event. So that's where this year we have the Rocky Mountain Front Farmers Market. It's a private individual that runs this community market, who's also going to run the Get Your Kicks market. And as a private individual, he can have a different set of farmers market rules than we could as MSU Extension.
Yeah, maybe just something to think about if you have a public entity running an event, because the person we're talking about who wanted to join the farmers market wanted to come have a booth and promote political opinions. And so we said, we know it sounds shallow, but we're trying to build community glue. And we don't really want this to turn into a place where people debate. We want to find commonality at these events. And so it's not that that's not important, but this is not the venue for it. And then we found out that we weren't backed up by extension, because that doesn't jive with university rules. And I know everyone out there in the community is not part of the university, but maybe you're part of some other group that has the similar challenge. So be careful with that. And it's normal for farmers markets to get around this by saying you have to be there to sell something you made. And so we kind of took care of that. And I think sustainability wise, that challenge is also better in the hands of the established farmers market. We don't want to also do that. Yeah, we never wanted to duplicate the farmers market. We wanted to get them to join and to take off on their own, which they did. Yeah.
Well, okay, ladies, we have a couple questions from our community. So I think we'll ask these questions if you're up for it. So first one is, were the dinners provided for free or did the visitors pay for meals? I'm thinking that's for you guys.
The concert was free, and the dinners were from a caterer, but they were made in the Pavilion Kitchen, which is our community hall, and it's right next door to this beautiful band shell that the Lions completed in 2023. So it's kind of like a community complex. So there's this Pavilion Community Hall, and then it's right next to the park, and the band shell's in the park. And so when we had the caterers, Shelby and I were basically saying, we've already rented this whole facility with grant money. You can cook in the kitchen and we'll help you clean up. And so the meals were business for these local vendors. And so we had somebody from Heart Butte making wonderful Indian tacos. We had Dan the Pizza Man coming from Conrad, making these amazing, authentic New York style pizzas, Neapolitan pizzas. And then we had a couple food trucks that finally did start to come. And now we're not having trouble recruiting food trucks so much. But, you know, at first they were wondering how much business they would get. And that's a legitimate concern. Yeah.
Yes,
Like food trucks from
absolutely.
far away just weren't willing to take the risk that they wouldn't have enough customers.
Right. They were not going to get a return on that investment of what
Yeah.
they were going to make.
So the concert was free and the food and everything else was full price. Yeah.
Full price. Carrie Lewis, they up in Cut Bank, they cut out for a little bit. And I think you said this, it was the sponsors were $750 or more, but can you tell us a little bit more about sponsors fees?
Yeah, so the sponsors didn't all have to contribute $750 or more. Just the ones on that slide I showed you were the ones that had contributed anywhere from $750 to, I think our biggest donor was $3,500. But we had a lot of people contribute $100. But going forward, we're not going to have some of the grant funding that was for initial projects like the innovation grant. And so we're going to have to raise some more money. So we raised our sponsorship level. Last year it was $1,500 if you wanted to have only your name on the banner that went on either side of the stage. This year it's $2,000 if you want to have only your name on the banner. And that's irrespective of how much the concert costs, because every band is a different price. And so we just say $2,000 is full sponsorship. You get your name on both sides of the stage. If you want to do $1,000, you're going to share that with somebody else. But we still need other sponsors to donate lesser amounts of money, and they're still recognized because every week we put an ad out in the paper that lists the main sponsors, but we also have signage and articles that list other sponsors. So even people who donate $100 get noticed. We did have a criticism from one of our patrons and said, "Why the heck aren't you guys passing the bucket? I would totally contribute." And we said, we'll get there. We will. But first we need to build our audience, you know, and we didn't want to invite people and ask them for money at the events right away. But I think there's a willingness for people to do that. So there might be something like that going forward. But I think we're actually getting enough sponsors. We may not need to.
Wow. That's awesome. So terrific. All right, last question. So again, for the listeners out there who might just be getting started and it's overwhelming sometimes, what's the most important piece of advice you can offer up now, sitting where you guys are at, with a year under your belt? What advice would you give to communities that are just getting started in projects like this?
I think to echo the earlier speakers, make a spectacle, go big, be willing to try something and fail. And, there's always room to learn, but it's the try that's important. And even if it's not as big, or maybe it gets bigger, when we started this, we were hoping to have 30 people per event. And I can't tell you how exciting it was to run up to Jenn and say, Jenn, we have 500 people here tonight. That was way more than 30. And like with that was our bar where we set, like, are we successful or not?
And I think I just want to have a shout out to Reimagining Rural and all the great stories we heard through Reimagining Rural, because it inspired us. And also we went up to Cut Bank and we learned about their spectacular farmers markets that Glacier County is involved with and so forth. And so we had some inspiration going into it. And part of that translated into a broad base of support. It was not Shelby and I. It was Shelby and I and 4 other people who were very active, and we all had other connections in the community. And letting people be involved in the way that they could kept it so that, you know, everybody was involved, like saying to the Benefice Teton Medical Center Foundation, yes, you can partner with us on an event. And yes, we'll give you guys $1 of every beer. And yes, bring the EMS folks and have them put a booth up. See, that brought us a whole bunch of people and created all that buy-in. So my take home thing was a broad base of support, because when everybody is part of it, they got skin in the game and they're way more invested, and it kept it fun and it made it creative.
Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh, we have more questions on here. All right, Shelby, you answered one of them. Yeah. Okay.
And the question about weather. So
yeah,
we're lucky just with the geographic layout of the space that the Choteau Pavilion that we were using, the kitchen, is a very large, nice meeting space. So if there was rain, we would have brought everything indoors. We mainly dealt with heat, and there were a couple evenings that we had to deal with wind, and knowing where we lived that was going to be a situation. But thankfully, we were able to tie everything down. We didn't lose any equipment. The windy night was probably the lowest attended night, but it ended up being one of the most pleasant evenings also, because it cooled off pretty quickly.
But going forward, that's going to be a challenge, because we didn't actually shoot for 30 people per event, but I said tongue in cheek, you know, when I went to see Helena's Alive at 5, they were getting a 60th of their population there. They were getting 1,000 people there every week. So I came back and said, okay, 1/60th of our population is 30 people. So that's all we got to do to be the same as Helena. But that was kind of facetious. We were hoping for more, but still we didn't imagine the numbers we got. With smaller numbers, we could have moved the whole thing indoors, but with the numbers we got, that won't actually work going forward. So that will be a concern that we need to address. And the band is protected by the band shell, but the audience is not. So with the kind of money we're paying for more expensive bands this year, and we're going to have to figure out a weather plan.
Contingency plans.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to wrap this part up so we can give communities the chance to have their local conversations. So thank you so much to you ladies for coming on and sharing your story. We at an extension were able to see this as a presentation last year at our what's called our annual conference, and it just knocked our socks off, and we were just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So thank you guys for coming out and sharing this with us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really an honor.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Okay. So with that, thank you again to all of our presenters. We appreciate all of you. We're going to pivot and move into the community conversation piece. All right. So here is the question. So we'll leave these up on the screen. There's a few questions that go back to the conversation or the presenters. And then there's some few questions about the self-assessment for the 20 clues to rural community survival. Now, these are guide points. You don't have to discuss these. If your community comes up with a topic and your conversation is gangbusters, go for it. If not, and you need some inspiration, these could help you. We will come back at 7:55. So we'll give you guys a little bit more time. We'll come back at 7:55. If in the meantime, tell us in the chat box what your community is talking about, so that we can share that with everybody, would be super helpful. So I'm going to stop talking and let your communities take over. So we'll be back 7:55. Okay, everybody, I hate to interrupt, but we have about 5 minutes left. So just let me know you got 5 minutes to wrap up your conversations. Okay, everybody, it's time to come back. We've got about 5 minutes left until we wrap things, until we conclude our session 2. So does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share? Y'all can keep on, you can keep on having your conversations too. We just will be ending this in about 5 minutes. So you can put it in the chat box, or you can unmute too. If you have questions or you have comments, or you want to share pieces of what your local conversation was. Okay, awkward pause. I have my question to you all is, were the self-assessments helpful at all? And you can put that in the chat box, or host is spotlight, or you can unmute. Okay, so Dylan said they didn't have enough responses. Yep, get that. Thompson Falls earlier had said they wanted to make it available to more people because we do value the feedback. And we asked the question, do you want us to keep it open longer so that you can get more input? Because we can do that. Saber says we mostly talk business. Yes, yes, yes. Keep it open longer. I don't know who that was, but we heard you. Okay. We mostly talked over the examples, then more about a disc golf course and grant options for that. Awesome. Down in Ekalaka, and I don't know if Aaron's there tonight, but I'm sure he would be very willing to help y'all. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, so honestly, hearing no more comments or questions from the group. Oh, Aaron is here. There's Aaron's cell phone number. So Aaron is the gentleman from Forsyth who was responsible for creating the disc golf course in Forsyth. So very, very knowledgeable on the topic. So he's more than willing to help out. Okay, so a little bit about next week's session. So one thing, okay, before I point that out, make sure if you are new to, if this is your first time coming to Reimagining Rural, please make sure you register so that we can get your contact information. You can either do that via the QR code, or we sent a link out to the community coordinators so they have that information, or just do old school pen and paper sign in sheet. We will take that as well. Now, next session is our last session. And we do have a featured speaker for this session, and it is Jeff Siegler from Revitalize or Die. And he has so that is a website program that he's put together. He also has a book out that's called Your City is Sick. He has come to Broadus and did a civic assessment with Broadus. He's also spoken at, I believe it was the Montana Downtown Conference. We've gotten to hear him a couple of times, and he has a great message about turning civic apathy into community pride. And then we'll be also hearing from Broadus. And we didn't get an opportunity tonight, but we will give Taylor some time in the next session to talk about Montana Community Foundation and their role in Reimagining Rural, and how they can assist communities. Oh, there's some contact information. All right, perfect. Okay, so with that, I think if we don't have any other questions or comments, we'll go ahead and sign off for the evening. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you to our special guests from the communities. Those were awesome stories to share. Thank you to our silent observers that have joined us as well, who just want to listen in. We appreciate you all coming in and listening about reimagining rural. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and we'll just call it a night. So take care, everybody, and safe travels getting home.